Britain's secret intelligence service, MI6, has always been shrouded in mystery. For decades, the chief was only known by the letter C, and until 1994, the Secret Service officially didn't exist. But MI6 is stepping out of the shadows.
To stay secret, we're going to have to become more open.
Richard Moore, the current chief of MI6, is the first C to publicly use social media. In one of his first ever interviews, he speaks to the Economist Asks podcast about the biggest threats facing the world today. From a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine to China's growing capability to access private data around the world.
Richard Moore, welcome to The Economist Asks.
Well, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Also in the studio is Shashank Joshi. He's The Economist's defence editor. Shashank, good to have you here too.
It's great to be here, thanks. What we've been watching most closely in the last couple of weeks has been this staggering military build-up on the edges of Ukraine, and watching with growing concern, I think. There's very important questions as to Russian intentions. What is Putin up to? Very simply, will he invade?
I think Vladimir Putin does think in terms of spheres of influence. I mean, very clearly, and he articulated that in his public language. He really does think that Russia in the 21st century has the right to sort of impose limits on the sovereignty of the countries on its periphery, and that's a problem because those countries are not going to accept that. And of course, from our perspective, the UK and our allies, neither are we. I mean, you can't say that's fine, Mr. Putin. You get to choose what the people of Ukraine get to decide, to do with their state. It's just not possible. So we do have this sort of rather chronic clash of ideas and ideology around this issue. It's really important that we're very clear in our communicating to Mr. Putin about the price that would be paid if he were to push ahead with that. I mean, I hope he won't. I think the Ukraine has moved on since 2014. I think they are more able to resist, and clearly the sort of economic and financial price would be huge for a Russian people that's already suffering from a raft of sanctions from 2014.
Let's turn to the big challenges that you addressed in a speech in London recently. And you said in the first speech you've given as head of MI6, indeed, that the greatest single priority for the service is to adapt to the rise of China. It seems like quite a zigzag from a few years ago when the messaging seemed to be China is a great trade and investment partner and that we should be open to China. Again, what has changed, or have you just reached a different judgment?
It goes back to why I gave the speech. I wanted to explain a bit about what the service is doing. And the fact is that the work we're doing on China is now the most important work that we are doing. And it's not that the work we do on Russia and international terrorism is any less important than it was. It's just that the prominence and the need to understand China has grown because China's influence and place in the world has grown. But I said very clearly in the speech that I thought we needed to have a positive agenda with China, that we needed to trade with China, and that we needed their cooperation on the key transnational issues, climate change, biodiversity. And at the end of the day, climate change is the biggest issue of all. So, I was advocating the need to cooperate with China on that. But at the same time, I was very clear that where China, because it is a government which is an authoritarian government with very different values from our own, where it pursues its interests and its value systems in ways which clash with our own, it's quite important that we are robust in standing up for those values and interests. And in particular, as the integrated review set out, the key sort of battleground, if you like, is around technology. Do we compete effectively with the Chinese in the really big technologies of the 21st century?
I think what's really interesting about that is when we think of Russia as an intelligence challenge, we think of Novichok in Salisbury, we think of subversion across Europe, sort of paramilitary destruction. When we think of China, it's very different, but our understanding is still evolving. I think people instinctively understand the debate over Huawei, that is, control of telecommunications gear can give a foreign country, a foreign agency, access to data. I think what we're yet to fully understand or debate is things that seem less directly involved in the security space. That is, Chinese access to data around ride-sharing apps, dating apps, genetic testing kits, biometric data. I think you hinted at some of this in your speech, Richard, talking about a global surveillance web and how it affects the states that are buying this stuff from the Chinese, but also how it affects your agents and officers and their ability to go about their work.
The data trap that I was trying to articulate is much more difficult to define, isn't it? But it is the issue that we had the great debate around Huawei in this country. It's just that overseas, I think that level of understanding of these issues is not as high as it is here, and it needs to be, because over time, if you allow access into key data, then you will slowly erode your sovereignty. And of course, China is looking for these data streams because the greater amount of data you get, but also critically the amount of diversity of data you get from around the globe, the better your ability to build the artificial intelligence systems of the future.
Thanks for watching. You can listen to the full interview on our podcast, The Economist Asks. Click the link to find the episode and don't forget to subscribe.